Let's now implement the get arithmetic sequence method. So now you can see that the return type is an array of integers. That means internally in the methods, we're going to create a new array of certain size. And then we're going to return the array as output. Okay, so now we're going to return the first n elements in the arithmetic sequence. You can see n over here is one of the inputs, whose start term is the start. So start is the start term, and also the common difference is diff. Okay, let's see some example to get an idea. So now let's say, so now you can see that I deliberately choose the same arithmetic sequence because we know that in all the three method calls over here, the start term is 4, which means we have some arithmetic sequence starting at 4, and then the common difference is 3. Okay, over here, 3 is a common difference. Okay, and then now the different inputs over here is about how many elements do we want to retrieve from the first from the beginning. So now in the first case, we want to retrieve the first we want to retrieve nothing there. So this is a special case, which means just retrieve nothing, which would be empty array, or retrieve just one element, which would be an array of size 1, and also retrieve an array of size 5. Let's say conceptually that's how you can think of it. So now if you have an arithmetic sequence with starting term 4, so 4 and then the common difference is 3. That means every to calculate the next term, it will be the previous term plus the common difference. So 7 and then 10 and then 13 and then 17. Oh, not 17, 16. 16, 19, and then etc. Conceptually, this sequence can be just infinite. So now, depending on how large the third input over here is, that would determine the size of the array that we want to return. So now, in the very first case, we simply say over here 0. That means nothing. Nothing to be collected. So it would just be empty array. So empty array, I'll just say empty array like this. Okay, just empty, nothing to be retrieved. And then what about the second case? In the second case, we actually got of size 1. That means only retrieve an array that contains the first elements. Okay, that's what's going to return. And then also for the third case, we're going to retrieve an array of size 5 that contains the first 5 elements. So that's going to contain 4, 7, 10, 13, and 16. Okay, so now you can see that over here, more precisely, this is going to return just empty array, not null array. Okay, empty array. Okay, it's really important, not null. Okay, as we explained in the very first tutorial video about the basic syntax and concept, null array and empty array, they're completely different stuff. Okay, now in this case over here, we're going to return an array of size 1 of index 0, and then it was going to contain just 4. Okay, in the third case, we're going to return an array containing the first 5 elements of size 5. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then it's going to contain the first starting item 4, 7, 10, 13, and 16. The first 5 elements. So now here is how the method is going to work conceptually. Okay, so now we can deal with empty array as a special case to say if n happens to be 0, that means we just return empty array. Otherwise, the return array should be of size at least 1. When it is at least 1, that means we should really at least fill in the start item to begin with. Okay, so you can see the start item is over here. So 4 here and 4 here. Filled in 4 already, and then what you can do is you can now say the rest of the array is going to be let me choose this one here. The rest of the array over here is going to be filled in by a loop starting from index 1, because we already handled index 0 being the start item, starting from index 1 until n minus 1, right? You can see n over here is the size of the array, minus 1 will give you the last index. Okay, that will be from 1 until n minus 1, and then 0 here is only the start. Okay, when we do the loop, how do we do it? You can imagine that, let's say if the loop counter I starts from over here. Okay, how do we calculate this particular elements over here? How do we calculate 7? It will be simply be I minus 1 position the element that's stored in over here, which is 4 plus 3, the common difference over here, right? And then similarly, when we go to the second iteration, we will move I to the right by 1 position over here. And then what's I minus 1? Item I minus 1 is now to the left over here. So now how do we calculate this element over here? That would be the element at position I minus 1, which we computed in the first iteration, which is 7. 7 plus 3 will give us 10. Okay, we'll just continue going on like this. Okay, so that's kind of the idea. Okay, let's program this in Java. Okay, so it's really a very recommended practice for you. Rather than going to do the coding directly, you want to figure out the ideas conceptually and then translate it into Java. Okay. Okay, let's now go to your get arithmetic sequence over here. So what we will do is, first of all, we know that the size of the array that we want to return depends on how many elements we want to retrieve to make it the array, right? So now it depends on n. So integer array, let's say call that sequence, is assigned to new integer array of size n. Okay, so depending on what n is. So now in the first case over here, if n is 0, then we'll create an array of empty size. If n is 5, for example, and then n will be 5, so creating an array of size 5 accordingly. Okay, so now we want to say, now we'll only go into the loop to actually figure out exactly, like the green part over here, right? Like the green part over here. We only go into certain loops and also fill in the star item over here when the array, when n is actually strictly larger than 0, which means we want to retrieve something. Okay, so now let's go back to our Android Studio over here. Let's say this. I would say if n is strictly larger than 0, that means we do want to retrieve something. Otherwise, we bypass the body of the if statements and then simply return whatever sequence it is. Okay. Now, in the case where n is simply equal to 0, what's going to happen? When n is equal to 0, we initialize an empty array over here, and then n larger than 0 is false. 0 larger than 0 is false. So we'll simply return the empty array we just created. If n is strictly larger than 0, that means we got at least one element. That means we can fill in the star item at least. Integer array sequence. Oh, actually, we got it already. Sorry. So we can say sequence at position 0 is exactly equal to start. And now I'm going to run a loop. And as I said before, the loop is going to run starting from index 1 because we already just handled index 0. Okay. So now for integer I is assigned to 1, initialized to 1, I less than n, and then I plus plus. And then we'll say what's going to be the contents for sequence I. For example, what's going to be the item for sequence 1? It's going to be sequence 0 plus the common difference, right? What's going to be the value for sequence 2? Sequence 2 is going to be whatever sequence 1 is plus the common difference, right? And etc. It's going to be sequence I minus 1, okay, plus the common difference. Okay, let me make some comments for you. Okay, what I would do is, okay, if n is equal to 0, then we bypass the body of if statements, returning an empty array. Okay, now another special case for you. What about n is exactly just 1? Just 1. Pretty much like this case over here. N is exactly 1. What's going to happen? If n is equal to 1, 1 larger than 0 is true. That means we're going to set the sequence 0 to be star. Pretty much like I would set the sequence 0 to be 4 over here. Okay, and now are we going to execute the body of the loop? We are actually not, because think it this way. If n happens to be 1, and now I starting from 1, so 1 less than 1 would be false. That means we don't even go into the loop for the very first time. That means we'll bypass the body of the loop. Okay, what we'll do is, if n is exactly equal to 1, then we bypass the body of loop, in which case returning an array of size 1 with sequence 0 equals a star. Okay, you should really try to see these special cases to see different execution flow it might be depending on the input values. Okay, that's about it. And now, let's now run a test here to make sure it works. Okay, it's a very simple method, but given that you understand this, it's not so difficult to program. Okay, let's now just execute the tester and see what we got. Okay, so now we got get arithmetic sequence over here. Okay, so that's what we have over here. Let's go to utilities tester. Get arithmetic sequence. Okay, so let's see one by one. Now for the first one, 3 and 2 and 0. So that should be empty array over here. For the second one over here, 3 and 2. And then just the first element. So that'll be the start item, 3. Okay, and then 3 and 2. And then we get the first 5 elements over here. So we got 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. Looks right. And then similarly, I also put a case where the common difference can be just minus. Okay, you will see that it also works. Again, whenever you got n being 0, that means empty array. Be careful, not null array. Okay, so which means if you simply just do things like, for example, if you simply say rather than new integer n, you simply say null, for example, you're gonna run into trouble. So this is really the neatest way to do it.